I know you said during your speech that the users were at least familiar with the system. Do you think there was a difference between older and younger adults actually understanding how it worked and not just being familiar with how to use it?
That's a good question. I didn't address how familiar, so how I only addressed what people said in terms of they were familiar with the system. So it was a Likert type scale that I asked them to rate their familiarity with the system. I didn't do any sort of analysis of the mental model, the underlying mental model that people had about using a system. So I don't know that I would have a specific prediction on whether or not the older adults had a better idea of exactly what was going on in the system. I think, and I'm not sure that it matters for this because, we could argue these were the younger adults were Georgia Tech younger adults that I used. So if you wanted to argue that to not misclose when using a system, you have to have a really thorough understanding of the system that you're using, then you might come back and say, well, these were Georgia Tech undergrads. Some of them are, engineers and computer scientists. They probably have an idea of what's going on in the underlying system, and they still experienced misclosure. I mean, the guy at the Cornell Business School was like a technology admin. So my guess is that there's probably not a huge relationship between having this really sophisticated underlying mental model of the technology and misclosure incidents.
I've got a question about when the participant talked about their misclosures. Did they also talk about, I'm sorry about that, did they indicate what they did following those disclosures? Change in behavior, change in systems, change in technology uses, these kinds of things?
Yes, and I explicitly asked about that in the interview. So after every misclosure that was reported, I asked participants what they did. Had they experienced a similar misclosure afterwards, and if they changed any of their behaviors. I didn't present that here, but in a lot of cases, people said, oh, I tried to pay more attention. You did see in the one messaging system example where the younger adult reported changing from AIM when he misclosed, when he sent a message to the wrong recipient, he changed to using trillion, where the automatic shuffling of the cursor didn't happen. So at least in some cases, people did change systems. And given what I talked about in the first study, where people said reported avoidance behaviors, certainly some of that was avoiding using certain technologies. And if you experience a misclosure, we're defining that as a violation of privacy, then you would anticipate potentially that avoidance behaviors would be one response to that. But I certainly have the data, and I'd be happy to share that with you. Yes?
Did you discuss how important the misclosures were? Like, was it just a, oops, I slipped, or was it, oh man, this is really going to ruin, blank?
You guys are asking great questions. I did also ask about that, and in most cases, as you might expect, it was relatively inconsequential. So it was just you accidentally replied to the wrong person or something, and it was just a boring email that nobody cared about, or you accidentally sent a text to the wrong person or something like that. But in some cases, I did have a few very interesting cases where people said this had a huge impact. It was a really big deal.
Were there different, did you look at that in your study? Did you look at what percentage were just small slips because I wasn't paying attention versus what were actual major problems?
Well, I think that there's two things going on there. So one is like, was it just a little slip, and then one is consequences. And I think, a little slip, right, could have giant consequences, like the Cornell one that I shared earlier, right? That was a little slip, potentially has huge consequences. I don't know what happened. But so there's two things going on there. I do have the data about how people rated their own, like how big of a deal each misclosure incident that they reported was. So was this really bad, or was it not so bad? So I have that data. I haven't really done a lot with it, other than to say that it was a relatively small percentage that had large consequences associated with it, or the way that people reported it.
I I was just wondering if, like, maybe all of the major consequences were email only, and then, you know, slipping up the IM wasn't a big deal. Things like that. Like, is there a certain type of technology that is more likely to cause a serious infraction than just a slight one?
Right, I haven't done that analysis. That's a good idea. Yeah. Thanks. Yes. Oh.
As you're talking, I'm wondering about the concept of evolving privacy norms that people have. What about the situation of misclosure that you don't even realize is a misclosure? Say, for instance, the undergraduate who thinks it's a great idea to put their Facebook address on their resume, not realizing that that means their prospective employer can see their trip to South Padre last year.
Mm-hmm. Well, you know, clearly in this study, I didn't ask people about things that they were unaware of, but definitely, I'm starting to think more about these secondary uses of information, secondary disclosures, and also the combination of information that people really have no idea what the consequences are. There are a lot of people who have done really good work in that area, and I'm trying to think about how that integrates into this area. But yeah, you know, I didn't get any of those kinds of things in the interviews that I was doing. Yes.
This is not actually about your research. It sort of goes beyond that. I wonder what your take is on this, I don't know, philosophical issue. It's a standard joke in information security stuff. Our beloved leader, who's not here, I think, likes to talk about it, that all the problems in information security will be removed the moment we remove the users, the human process. I disagree with him. I think that also the computers should be unplugged. But given that, your research is very important because you look at a very important aspect of where humans make errors. Your suggestion for improvement of the design makes sense also. Are you at all optimistic that we can somehow technologically minimize the amount of human error?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think we have a long history in human factors of looking at a problem, seeing where errors are occurring, addressing those systematically, and coming up with design alternatives that take into consideration how people approach a technology, what's going on in their workflow, and being able to make changes that have huge impacts in terms of the number of errors that occur and what the consequences of those errors are. So we have a.
Why am I still responding to BCC messages?
Well, I just did this research this year, so give me a couple years, but I'm trying. Yeah, this is brand new stuff, and I think I'm the first person that's applied kind of this error framework to the human factors problem of privacy. So I'm hoping that approach will be beneficial, and that will actually some of the design suggestions, which again are really simple sort of design suggestions. I'm not a designer. I haven't come up with some ridiculously brilliant, elegant.
Are you sure you want to send this message?
No, that I've heard that. I've had that question actually quite a few times, and no, I don't think that's the way to go. But there are a lot of other things that we can do that aren't just bugging people.
Thank you.
Sure, thank you.
Could you please elaborate on your critique on Altman theory? You work in misclosure. You look at it as a binary thing. If you want to disclose, you don't want to disclose. And then you discuss Altman theory and willingness to disclose. And
We have 1 minute, and I'm not sure that I understand your question.
In the middle of your presentation,
Yes.
you discuss Altman's work.
Yes.
As I understand, Altman's work is about willingness to disclose, not about disclosure.
No, it's not about misclosure, but it is about boundary regulation and disclosure, right? So Altman definitely does address this idea of letting pieces of information